Welcome to the Bleeding Edge Report with Chris and Treg, where tech meets its match. Welcome to the second part of How Will Artificial Intelligence Change the Cybersecurity ARMS Race with Chuck Brooks. Chuck is considered one of the foremost experts in cybersecurity. He was given the title of Cybersecurity Person of the Year by Cyber Express. He has had several executive roles at tech firms such as Intel, AT&T, IBM, named top person to follow in tech by LinkedIn with 98,000 subscribers. He is an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, 2 presidential appointments for executive service, and he can be found at www.brooksci.com. Recently, he just got done co-chairing a conference in Rome, Italy on cybersecurity and has several other conferences that he's chairing or co-chairing coming up. So let's go ahead and jump into the second part of this discussion. Thanks for listening. Okay, Chuck, just kind of moving along here a little bit. So from our standpoint as consultants with technology companies, it seems that businesses are more or less on their own trying to protect themselves from cybersecurity threats. And that's from, we've worked with companies for 20, 30 years. For example, it's our understanding that $155 billion is being spent on cybersecurity a year globally. Okay. But there's 8 trillion right now. The estimate is 8 trillion estimated being taken from businesses and customers. So it doesn't seem, we hate to say this, but it doesn't seem to be working, and going in the right direction. And it seems like it's just getting a little bit worse. So our question is, to what extent do you see the U.S. government needing to do more to protect business from this increasing danger? And what can we kind of expect in the future, do you think? Basically, is the government going to step in and help businesses more than what they're currently doing, do you think?
I think they will. I mean, this has been a pretty busy year for DHS, CISA. They came out with the zero trust mandate, and they also have been working on Shields Up and trying to.
What is this? What is the zero trust mandate?
That's really more for the government agencies to make sure that everything in their network is accounted for. It's really identity access management, who has access, who has administration, is what's attached in your network, and they're required by law now, their own, to be able to find that out and basically, do an audit of everything inside their networks.
Okay.
Which means most of them are probably compromised. So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Some of this is happening in the private sector too, but it's really a government-oriented and inward thing. But Shields Up was focused on critical infrastructure for private sector, just warning them and sharing threat intelligence. But you're exactly right. I mean, we're in a new era. And we have grants for law enforcement, for fire, for other things coming from government. And I think we're going to need to end up doing grants to small businesses eventually to secure themselves. We probably have to change the equation with critical infrastructure because we're expecting basically industry that are under attack from China and Russia to defend against those threats without any real help. And I think that 5 years from now, I think that there'll be much more coordination, collaboration, and maybe even direct intervention by the government and with its capabilities in these critical infrastructures. And I think, unfortunately, it will probably take a big incident to happen, but it will happen. And I mean, there's already been a few. I mean, SolarWinds is one, for example.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But what you said is exactly right. We just seem to get worse and worse, and no one's paying attention. But CISA has been really trying to promote awareness, and that's part of it. But I think at this point, we have to look at the new architectures and environment out there with these emerging technologies, and recognize that particularly small and medium business really can't arm themselves. They need help, and government needs to be there for them.
So I think back around 2008. So 2008. You had the development and the big push, the high tech. It was called the Healthcare High Tech Act in 2008, and that started the EMR EHR systems, and it basically provided funding to all business sizes on the medical side to be able to implement technology infrastructure for medical records. The idea was, to be able to share information and everything else. And how that worked was that they were allowed to, they were basically provided funds, businesses were provided funds, medical locations, and then they had to prove that they implemented, that technology. I mean, do you see it maybe going as far as something like that, where the government actually steps in and starts writing checks for people to implement stuff and then requiring them to say they have this?
I think it needs to go that way.
Okay.
I don't know if it will, how soon it will. Again, I think it will take another big incident and another wake-up call, even though we've had dozens of them. But I think that's really, because of this environment is so challenging, so much more sophisticated it was a decade ago. It's just unreasonable for us to expect that, like, for instance, a hospital would have the understanding capability and the people, let alone to defend itself against some of these threats. So I think financial community industries is much more, fortified. They've hired a lot of good people. They have, quality, and they pay well. But most industries don't have that ability.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So I think it's going to go that direction.
Another thing that I was thinking about that I think is cultural. Looking back at the number of conferences that you've co-chaired or videos that we've done together on this same topic, there seems to still be a disconnect between, mom and pop who run a business, even if it's an online business, and cyber crime. So when we quote statistics, this is one of the statistics, an $8 trillion business is what cybercrime is. That blew me away because, the largest spender in the world is the United States government, and they're only at $2.5 trillion, right, for this year's budget.
Yeah.
Right? $2.5 trillion is enormous. I can't get my head
money.
around that. $8 trillion. I mean, that's just mind blowing from that standpoint. And yeah, this is just, if this spreads like a virus, like it possibly could, to, wipe out mom and pop businesses, they would never recover because the ransomware will just wipe them out. So they're out of business either way, right? They're locked out of their data or they're bankrupt. One of the two, because how many people have insurance against this type of crime?
Yeah. And it's very difficult to get insurance, even if you're a bigger company, but
exactly. So I think you are correct that it's going to end up being some sort of grant writing or some sort of mandatory prove you've complied situation just to kickstart better defense, right? And with that in mind, I'm thinking about, we talk a lot about, the fundamentals of protecting ourselves, right? So like with ransomware, if you have a systematic backup system, you're probably better off, right? That's safe to say. If you do your software patches and you apply those in a timely and a regular manner as needed, well, they're there for a purpose. They're there to fix exposures, right?
Right.
And, if you take care of your password protection, right? Those are like the top three things. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. I mean, cyber hygiene, really things that anyone can do, so everyone doesn't, unfortunately. Even
exactly.
Yeah.
You beat me to the punch. Like Treg and I were talking about this. Nobody does it the way they should, right? And so why is that? And what can we really do about it? I guess is the question. What are your thoughts? I mean, how do we get better compliance kickstarted? Is it through this regulation idea?
I think it will probably take something like that. But, I think we need to also really start teaching it even at the elementary school level about cyber. As kids growing up basically connected to their smartphones and have no conception of what privacy is and what the threats are all through college. So I think we have to start, the re-education. But I mean, that'll take time. But I mean, there needs to be public campaigns. There needs to be more outreach on these things, and just the cyber hygiene alone could prevent a lot of these attacks, because hackers will go where the lowest hanging fruit is, and they don't want to bother, if it's going to be too difficult. And if you have some of those things, like you said, multi-factor authentication, strong passwords, maybe even encryption, it's going to be difficult for them to go after you as a primary target. So I think we need to really make a campaign. I think CISA is trying to do that, but it's difficult to get everyone's attention. and particularly small business. And it worries me because small business and medium business just seem to be a matter of fact on this. And I think I don't know what it's going to take to really get them to focus. I understand that they have very small budgets and they don't have in-house expertise. So it may go to a managed, the managed capabilities of managed service of to really work with them. But though that has not taken off like I thought it would, again, I think it's a budget thing.
Yeah.
Votes. That's the word, votes. So just so you know, Chuck, I also come from a world of doing a lot of political research.
Oh, okay.
Yes, a lot for the national committees, actually. So one of the things that I see here is probably until this becomes such an issue that it has an impact on votes, then at that point, then there's going to be a lot of intervention, right? Then there's going to be a lot more exposure higher up on the decision process in the executive branch and the legislature. So until the issue gets highlighted enough that someone will change their vote for one person or another in a campaign, because this person has a very strong stance on cybersecurity versus this other person doesn't, or something like that. Until it hits that, it's going to be a while.
Yeah, you're right. I actually, I'm thinking back at all the campaigns I've seen. I haven't seen cybersecurity being talked about as an issue up front at all.
Well, they how it works in political research, is you basically have to get your laundry list of issues and then get your position on all the issues. So you go out and you talk to people, normal voters in the case, of what all your issues are. And that's how they develop their list of issues. And that's the issues they bring forth to try and garner more votes. So in this case, those issues don't come up. Cybersecurity doesn't come up. So it's not going to be on anybody's platform. Yeah. But you're right. We haven't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we need a grassroots effort to understand that, to promote this. And I don't know. I know there's a lot of good organizations doing stuff out there, but they're more industry organizations with memberships for their vendors and clients, rather than just a straight 501c3 trying to promote cyber hygiene.
I liked your comment you made about the public service announcements. You didn't quite say it that way, but to get the word out, I was thinking of the Indian that we had on television in the 1970s crying about all the garbage on the side of the highway, right? It took a long time to get people to stop throwing stuff out the window, but the truth is it worked, right? So, I'm completely on board with that type of thing. That's a good message. It's constructive. It's it could help people think about it, because you really have to make it a priority, as Treg was saying. So then people will talk about it. But right now, if it doesn't affect you, if you're not a victim, you're not thinking about it. That's the unfortunate truth, right?
You're absolutely right. I think one positive thing, I've seen a lot more now discussions on social media in general, just because of all the people post events all the time, and there's an event every day with the breach. But there's also a lot of groups and a lot of people visible from the IT and the cyber community that are openly active on LinkedIn and a lot of the groups. And I think hopefully the message is getting a little bit out there, but it may be speaking already to the choir. I mean, I think it's really the younger generation that's going to be the problem.
So my last question, and I'll leave one for Treg. My last question is, as you know, we work with several clients, mainly in technology industry and small, medium-sized businesses, who, if they're not producing cybersecurity software, they're a target. So other than maintaining the hygiene and those three things that we talked about with the password protection, the patches and keeping updated on that, and then the third one just slipped my mind because that's what's going to happen. Other than doing all the hygiene, what should a business leader be thinking about above and beyond that in order to, I guess, get more effective defense on their organization and protecting the company from potential software or ransomware attacks? What do you think?
Good question. I think it really starts with risk management. So if they really have an interest in protecting their business, there's a lot of resources available, including from NIST, on frameworks you can use for every industry. I think that's a starting point, because when you're a small business or a medium business, the first thing you should do is look where all your gaps are, look where you need to procure technologies, look who you need to advise you, and then maybe next go into penetration testing and then all that kind of stuff. But the other aspect, I think, is that companies themselves need to have a cyber expert at the table on everything they do. It's been traditionally left out and been a cost item, and
Agree.
now I think that, they don't have the time and the ability to monitor and look at all the evolving threats. But if you have someone as part of the C-suite that can do that, that can brief everyone, periodically when they meet and have plans and educate, the rest of the people from the marketing, the legal, and the operational people in a company, then you're going to make some inroads, I think, in terms of getting a better security posture.
Well, you certainly raise it as a priority, and that's the message we've been telling folks, which is make it a priority. Talk about it. That's the kickoff point, right?
Absolutely.
And the rest of the content will flow, but you're keeping it top of mind. And if it's important to the company, then it's going to be more important to the employee, and that's how you're going to drive that drumbeat through to change the culture from where it is today. But on the upside, switching back to the positive for a minute.
Positive.
Leveraging things like artificial intelligence and other cutting edge technology like 5G, do you see any new tools and capabilities that are coming to once again aid company leaders to combat the cybersecurity threats that we see today?
Yeah. Well, I think for one thing, I mean, the threat intelligence software and capabilities have grown immensely in the last few years. So there's a lot of good services out there that companies could use. Also, I think there's also a lot of technologies that watch the perimeter in the networks that could be useful, that companies could, I don't want to name names and endorse them, but there's a lot of good options there. And I think they're one of the areas that is also being checked into more because, is behavioral. When you're talking about Chat GPT, now you're looking at, okay, with the social engineering aspect of insider threats. Insider threats are very difficult to detect. And so now there's more of a capability using behavioral analytics to look when there's an aberration, look when something's doing they're not supposed to be doing. So there's positives to with technology. And again, you could also use it to automate in a lot of ways. Some of the more, like robotic processing automation kind of tasks you have in a company. But, I think that it is a really great thing if you can understand it and utilize it. And I think that's not just with cybersecurity, I think it's the era we're going into. Everything's going to have a technological aspect to it. So we have to really learn and understand the uses and positives as well as the threats from it.
One thing I just wanted to mention, there was a place that got ransomware attacked just about a mile down the road. Anyway, it's a small place. They are not that small, about 500 employees. They work with manufacturing subcomponents for airlines, for aircraft, for Boeing and other manufacturers. Well, anyway, they got hacked, and all their data was up for ransom. They said, we're not going to pay it. They lost all their data, no backups. The last backup they had was about 3 or 4 years ago, and they had to basically start from scratch. And we're talking 3 floors of manufacturing, process that had to start from scratch. One thing I just want to leave with is, or my last question is, do you think that these attacks go towards more industries and areas that don't have that security? For example, the location I just told you about, they're more of almost a blue collar situation where they're just manufacturing. They have computers that they're using versus, and obviously that's a lot of money there, versus some other place that probably has cybersecurity. Because it just seems like those places that are low tech, they don't think about those things and they don't have the staff. And you don't hear about that. But anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think also one of the things you discussed here is really part of a supply chain. So if you're looking at sophisticated threat actors, one of the things they do want to go after is supply chain, the vendors in the supply chain, particularly when they're making components that are important from a national security perspective or from a commercial perspective. So it's not surprising that company was attacked because of that. But I do agree that I think that for the most part, if you're not visible and you're very small, You may not be discovered by the hackers, but 500 people and part of the supply chain that for the aerospace industries, I think you definitely have to have cybersecurity as part of your priority. I think there's a lot of people in supply chains that don't recognize that. And there are a lot of small companies in supply chains, but they're going after these supply chains because they know that's the easiest way in. And it's not just affecting that company, but it's affecting everyone else on that supply chain.
Thank you very much on behalf of the Bleeding Edge report. We appreciate your time, Chuck.
It was great being here. Great questions and great talking to you.